Joji has a very unique style of music. He combines all these angelic vocals with like crazy heavy hip hop beats to create this feeling of like angsty sorrow and the rage that kind of comes from it. But his style has changed across the years, and it changes between albums, and now that he's just dropped a new album, I thought it'd be really fun to kind of deconstruct this style, see how he does it, and then see if we can use that to make something that sounds like Joji ourselves. The only problem is, I haven't listened to the album yet. This video is sponsored by Clean My Mac. More on them later. So how do you do the Joji thing, hey? Well, if the only reason you clicked on this video is to find the answer to that, from my experience, just write some simple moody chords on a lo-fi piano or synth, add a bunch of angelic vocals with a cool melody line over the top, and then annihilate it all with a heavy hip-hop beat, and Robert's your mother's brother. Wait, you're still here. You must want to go a little bit deeper then. Joji doesn't really just have one style, he's got a few distinct ones, and listening to this album is reminding me of that. The first song, Pixelated Kisses, is definitely an example of his super heavy stuff.
That was intense.
Then there was some that came after which remind me of his ballads like Glimpse of Us and Slow Dancing in the Dark. But most of the stuff, especially the stuff in the middle of the album, sits somewhere in between those two styles. It's got a nice little hip hop groove, but it's also got some pop vocals which weave in and out of it. My favourite songs in the album were definitely in the middle here.
That was phenomenal. Gonna have to figure out what like notes those are.
And as I come to the end of my first listen, it's very clear that this is the style which I want to try and replicate. That's the album. Very interesting. I think that was actually more of a return to like some of his older stuff on probably ballads, honestly. A lot of ballads. I don't know, I wasn't crazy about a lot of the songs on that. My favorites were definitely Tarmac, Hotel California, Past Won't Leave My Bed. Didn't mind Silhouette Man, and there are a couple more in there. Those are definitely the songs that I'm gonna draw inspiration from when I'm trying to recreate his sound. Very interesting. So after sitting down at my piano that night, here's my rundown. A lot of his songs are built around very simple 3-note chords arpeggiated into a pattern which creates a really cool melody to sit underneath. I said 3-note chords, so those are often either triads, shell 7th chords, or even dyads with a doubled octave. If you don't know what any of that means, basically just play with the 1st, 3rd, 5th, and 7th scale degrees of whichever chords that you've decided on until you find a cool melody to carry the song. Sometimes he uses pianos or synths, but in the songs that I liked, he uses guitar. Then to get it into the Joji world, just make it really lo-fi. If you have RC20, this is your best friend. Pump the distortion, pump the wobble, and pump the reverb, and just play around until you get something that sounds like it would be in his song. And then we move on to the other melody which carries the song, the vocal melody. There was something really interesting I noticed about the melodies in the verses in Tarmac and Hotel California. They're just using 3 notes, the 1st, the 2nd, and the 3rd scale degrees. Running out of flowers, running out of hours, running down an hour, lost. Then if we do a bunch more takes and pan them hard left and right to give space to the melody in the middle, we get this. Running out of flowers, running out of hours, running down an hour, lost. Those drums from before were okay, but they need to be more lo-fi. And then finally bring in a super distorted 808 bass. But suddenly, it doesn't sound very good. It's not terrible, but it's just very formulaic and boring and doesn't, I don't know, there's no feeling to it. If you've made music for any period of time, you understand this feeling very well. You think you've cracked the code, you have all the techniques. In theory, you know how to do the thing, and then you sit down to do it, and it doesn't come together. And it's kind of because the creative process is not linear, and you need to feel your way through. If you're gonna make something that makes other people feel, you've got to feel your way through it while you're making it. So this leads to the second half of the video where I take these techniques not as some recipe for creating Joji's music, but each of them as a different jumping off point to help inspire me to create something that makes me feel in the same way that his music does. And as you probably know, when I'm feeling my way through something like this, my creativity can get a little bit messy and my sessions can get a little bit out of hand. Holy, there's a lot of stuff here. But letting my creativity be that messy is the only way I know how to make something that actually works in the end. And the only way I'm gonna have any chance of actually doing that is if my Mac is running smoothly. That's why I'm pretty stoked today to actually have Clean My Mac sponsoring this video. If you've got a keen eye, you might know that I've actually been using Clean My Mac for a little while now, and I really like it. Clean My Mac is an Apple notarized application which helps you keep your Mac running smoothly with pretty much zero effort, so you can actually focus on making music without having to freeze every single track in your session. I've been there. Other than the malware protection and the literal make it faster button, I'm a big fan of the way it helps me stay on top of the clutter on my Mac so that I can stay organized as a producer. It could help you find and identify those 6 identical drum samples or just old bounces that you don't need anymore that are taking up space, and it's even got a cloud cleanup feature if that's something you're into. But the most valuable thing it's done for me actually involves Logic Pro. That's right, when I upgraded to the brand new Clean My Mac, basically it has a feature called Space Lens, which helps you see and visualize your Mac storage and what's taking up the most space. I discovered that Logic had downloaded 120 gigabytes of sounds which were just sitting there, taking up space. I deleted them immediately. So if your Mac is running slow and it's stopping you from making your best work, it might be time for a new Mac. Or you might just need to get Clean My Mac, which is gonna be a lot cheaper than buying a brand new Mac. Get tidy today. Try 7 days free and use my code CAMU for 20% off. Thanks Clean My Mac for sponsoring today's video. So I've got my list of techniques for stuff which makes Joji sound like Joji, which I'll talk about along the way, but instead of going through it methodically to try and reconstruct it in some way, I'm just gonna feel my way through it and see if this works. With the learnings from his album under my belt, it's time to actually just let it all flow. Listening to those songs that I like, I could hear that there was a stomp kick layered on top of an 808. And this is something that I pretty much never do, so starting here felt like it would start the inspiration in the Joji realm. But this angle just wasn't that inspiring, so I tried something else. So let's just noodle around and see if we can find something. I feel like he'd sing something over that. Let's put that in and pause the bass line for this for a minute. This melody was actually feeling quite promising to me, but if I immediately just layered on some vocals, a bass, and chucked some drums in, it would sound super generic. Instead, I wanted to build a space in the same way that Joji seems to do at the start of a lot of his songs. And he does that using ambience and Foley. Wow, that's moody as fuck. Now putting in the bass feels more right. Now for the drums, and again, if I was just to throw in a generic drum loop like I did in my first attempt, it wouldn't fit with the elements and it would take away from the space we've created. Instead, I'm going to construct one myself. Joji uses a lot of different random hits which kind of bring you up and down in different ways. It's hard to explain, but let's see if we can do it. I'm thinking of like a... and then that'll lead the vocal where it wants to go. That was just a bunch of splice scrolling, finding cool samples, and then processing them until they fit that sound that I just beatboxed. And I'm going for like a... Because the thing about Joji's work is it's so produced that the more you process a sound, often the more in vibe it sounds. Pause the video for your Joji percussion cheat sheet. Now it's time for the vocals, and one thing I noticed about them is they might be simple in terms of the number of notes that they use, but the rhythms of them intertwine really perfectly with the percussion. That's why I found it useful to get the percussion in before trying to find a melody to fit it. Wanna see it, see that, wanna take me there. But I still didn't like the melody, so I tried another one. But that was literally just a melody from one of my songs. But then I remembered that technique that I noticed Joji using, where he just plays around on the first, the second, and the third. I don't really feel that, you can really seal that, I can really do that, I don't really feel that, you can really steal that, I don't wanna heal that, I don't really feel that. So let's expand this loop. Then I expanded it beyond the verse in the same way that Joji did in Hotel California. That's just by opening the chords by voicing them a bit higher and then strumming them with some fuzz and reverb. One of the big things that Joji did in Pass Won't Leave My Bed is the note that he hit was the second.
Gonna have to figure out what like notes those are.
And I was trying to think of what to do in this chorus when the chords kind of open up a bit more, and then I realized I could do that. And I've got this little melody idea. Oh, I don't wanna leave. I don't wanna be. I don't wanna be. With this melody in it, felt like I was almost there, but there was just one more thing. One thing that would bring this back specifically to this album, Piss in the Wind, and it's the very first thing you notice on the very first song. How incredibly distorted the entire thing is. It's a similar thing that Tyler the Creator does on a lot of his stuff, and it's putting distortion on a group, or even sometimes the master, to let everything squash together into one beautiful, gritty, angry mess. New day. I just did a little quick arrangement, and let's see what we ended up with. I don't really feel that, you can really see that. I don't wanna heal that, I don't really feel that. I don't really feel that, you can really see that. I don't wanna heal that, I don't really feel that. I don't really feel that, feel that, feel that. You can really see that, feel that, feel that. I don't really feel that, feel that. You can really have me. Somebody in the sky. I don't wanna be. I don't wanna be. I don't wanna be. I quite like it, you know. That just kind of goes to show that you can deconstruct a song and an artist and find all the techniques that they use, and like that's a great starting point. But then when it comes to making stuff, you kind of need to just flow and let stuff happen. Otherwise it'll come out feeling formulaic and terrible. And that I don't think sounds terrible, but I mean, you can be the judge. Making things is a wonderful and weird little process, and you kind of got to feel your way through and feel at each stage what feels right and what doesn't. Or at least I do. I don't know what you need to do. So hope you enjoyed. Hope you learned a little bit about how to do this whole Joji sound thing, even if it is just my rendition. And yeah, hope to see you in the next video. Peace. I don't really feel that, you can really see that. I don't wanna heal that, I don't really